The morning my daughter-in-law told me I was living too comfortably, I was standing on the front step of a house I had helped them buy. Not metaphorically, not in the way people say they helped and mean they gave advice or co-signed something. I mean, I had written a check for $42,000 toward the down payment because the banks wouldn't approve them for enough, and because my son looked at me with those eyes he had since he was 7 years old, and I never learned how to say no to those eyes. I was holding a container of butter tarts I had made that morning, the kind with the runny filling, the way his grandmother used to make them, the way he had asked me for it every birthday until he was 19. I had driven 40 minutes from my place in Guelph to their house in Oakville because it was a Saturday, because I thought family visited on Saturdays, because I still believed at 63 years old that I understood what this family was. She opened the door about 6 inches, not wide. Not the way you open a door for someone you expected, the way you open it when you're deciding whether to let them in at all. "He's busy," she said. I held up the container. "I just brought some baking. I won't stay long." She looked at the container the way you look at something you're about to throw out. Then she looked at me, and she said it. Clear as anything, no hesitation, no softening of the voice. "Honestly, Maureen, you really do live quite comfortably for a retired teacher. Have you thought about cutting back a little? Freeing up some of that pension?" I stood there for a moment. The butter tarts were warm through the bottom of the container. I did not say anything. I smiled, I think, or something that looked like a smile. I said I'd leave the tarts on the step. I walked back to my car. I sat in the driveway for longer than I should have, watching a robin pull something out of the lawn, and I thought about what she had just said. The casual way she had said it, like she had been thinking it for a while, like it was a reasonable thing to say to your husband's mother on a Saturday morning. I drove home. I did not cry until I got past the 403. I need to tell you something before I go any further. I need you to understand who I was before all of this, so you understand what I am telling you now. I taught grade 4 in Waterloo Region for 31 years. I raised my son Marcus mostly on my own after his father and I separated. I watched every school play, drove every hockey practice, stayed up past midnight finishing a model of the solar system made from styrofoam balls because he had forgotten to mention the project until the night before. When he met her, I welcomed her. When they got engaged, I threw a dinner party. When they said they needed help with the house, I said yes. I said yes to a lot of things. That is the part that took me the longest to understand. Not what they did, but that I had made it possible, slowly, over years, by never once saying no. It had started small, the way these things always do. Marcus called me in the spring of 2019, about 8 months after the wedding, and said they were having a bit of a tight month. Could I help with groceries? It was $220. I transferred it that afternoon. A few weeks later, her car needed new tires. $460. Then it was his insurance renewal because their cash flow was off that month. Then her gym membership, which I thought was odd, but I didn't say so. Then a weekend trip to Montreal that she had apparently already booked, and they just needed a little bridge funding, $640. By the end of that first year, I had a folder on my laptop. I made it because I am a retired teacher, and I keep records of everything. And the folder had a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet had 53 entries. 53 separate transfers, e-transfers and checks, and one wire I had to go into the branch to do. All to the same 2 people, all from my pension, my savings, the money I had carefully set aside over 30 years because I knew I would be doing retirement alone, because I was not the kind of woman who planned to depend on anyone. I kept the folder, but I did not look at it very often. Looking at it made me feel something I did not want to feel. So I focused on the other thing, which was that my son called me regularly, that he came to Guelph for Christmas, that sometimes he would text me a photo of something funny, and it felt like we were close, and I told myself that was what mattered. Her comment on the front step changed something in me. Not immediately. The change was slow, but it started that day. That evening, I opened the folder. By then it was not 53 entries. It had been 2.5 years. The spreadsheet had 112 rows. I stared at that number for a long time. 112 separate times I had transferred money to my son and his wife. The amounts ranged from $80 to the $42,000 for the down payment, with most of them sitting somewhere between $300 to $1,200. I had a total at the bottom of the column, a formula I had typed in but never really looked at directly, the way you avoid looking at something you're not ready to see. I looked at it. The number was $94,880, nearly $95,000 in 2.5 years. On top of the down payment, I made myself a cup of tea, and I sat at my kitchen table in Guelph, and I looked at the number for a very long time. Outside, the street light came on. The neighbor's cat crossed the yard. The tea went cold. I thought about what she had said, about my pension, about me living too comfortably. I thought about the fact that she worked full-time as a marketing manager at a firm in Mississauga. I thought about the fact that Marcus was in software, that he had told me once, when he was still telling me things, that he was making just over $90,000 a year, 2 full-time incomes, a house in Oakville, new cars, both of them. I had seen the photos on her Instagram. I am not a person who uses Instagram, but my friend Deborah had shown me once photos of a trip to Portugal, a weekend in Tremblant, a dinner at a restaurant in Toronto I looked up afterward that charged $45 for a main course. I had not been to Portugal. I had not been anywhere in 4 years because I was careful with money, because I was a retired teacher on a pension, because I had been quietly moving that pension into someone else's life without fully admitting to myself what I was doing. She wanted me to live less comfortably. I already was. I did not sleep well that night. I lay in the dark, and I made myself go through the spreadsheet again in my head, not the numbers, but the calls, the way each one had been framed. Always Marcus who called, almost never her. Always something just this once, always some version of "we'll sort it out next month." I thought about the times I had offered to come for Sunday dinner and been told they had plans, the times I had asked if I could take the 2 of them out and she had been busy, the times I had sent birthday cards to her and never received a response, not a text, not a word, just silence. I thought about the butter tarts on the front step. The next morning I called my younger son. His name is Owen. He's 38, lives in Kingston with his partner and their 2 kids, works as a site supervisor for a construction company. Owen and I have always been straightforward with each other, sometimes more than is comfortable. He calls every Sunday without being asked. He remembered my birthday last year with a hand-drawn card from his youngest, which I have on my refrigerator. He had known, he told me, when I explained what I had found in the spreadsheet. Not the full amount, but he had suspected something was wrong for a while. He had tried to say something 2 years ago, gentle, cautious, not wanting to make things worse. I had told him Marcus was going through a hard patch and he just needed time. "Mum," he said very quietly, "what do you need from me right now?" I told him I needed to think clearly and I needed someone to know what I was about to do. I spent the following 2 weeks doing something I had never done before in my entire adult life. I stopped being available. Marcus called on a Thursday. I could see the call come in and I let it ring. He called again Friday. I sent a text that said, "I'm fine, just resting, we'll call soon." On the following Tuesday, the e-transfer request came through. $430, car insurance, the note said. Due tomorrow. I declined it. The app asks you to provide a reason. I left it blank. Then I opened the spreadsheet, which now had, because 2 more had come in since the night I first looked at it, 114 rows. I added the most recent declined one at the bottom with a note beside it that said, "Declined." I sat with that for a minute, looking at the word, and then I did something I had been turning over in my mind for 10 days. I started working backward. I went through every entry and I noted as best I could from memory and from text messages I had kept what each transfer was for: car insurance, groceries, gas, gym, a vet bill for the dog they had gotten without mentioning it to me, a home decor purchase. I had found that one out later when she posted a photo of a new accent chair, tickets to a concert, a weekend at a lodge in Muskoka. Eva Stroh's, that was a real one, that was legitimate. But beside most of the others, when I wrote out what the money had actually gone to, it looked like a list of choices. Every single item was a choice they had made, funded by a woman they had told to live less comfortably. I counted again, carefully, including the transfers that had come in since that night. 117 entries in the spreadsheet. I made a decision. My name is Maureen, and I am 63 years old, and I was a grade 4 teacher for 31 years. And I am reasonably intelligent, and I had spent 2.5 years sending nearly $100,000 to 2 adults who earned more combined than I had at the peak of my career. And I was done. I went to my bank's website that evening, and I changed my e-transfer password. I called the branch the next morning and flagged my account so that any new e-transfer requests would require in-branch authorization. I wrote a letter, an actual letter, on paper, and I kept it in a drawer because I wasn't sure yet if I would send it. And then I went for a walk by the river, which I do every morning, and I watched the geese arguing with each other over a piece of bread, and I felt something in my chest loosen for the first time in 2.5 years. The response was not immediate. There were texts first, from Marcus, mild ones, wondering if I had seen the transfer request, mentioning that the insurance was overdue now and he'd had to borrow from a colleague and could I just send it directly. I did not respond right away. When I did, I kept it very short. I'm going to take a little break from helping out financially for now. Let's talk soon. The phone rang 40 minutes later. I won't tell you everything that was said in that call because some of it is not mine to share and some of it I am still not ready to repeat out loud. But I will tell you this: he was angry in a way that surprised me. Not because I didn't expect anger, but because of what the anger was about. He was not angry that I was struggling. He did not ask how I was doing. He was angry about the inconvenience. He used the words unreliable and out of nowhere, and at one point, "You always do this," which I found fascinating since what I had always done, apparently, was give him money. I let him talk. I am a retired teacher. I know how to wait someone out. When he stopped, I said, "Marcus, I love you. I am going to take some time to look after myself. I'm not going anywhere. We can talk when you're ready to have a different kind of conversation." He hung up. 2 days later, she called. I did not answer. She left a voicemail that was so carefully constructed. I listened to it 3 times just to take note of what it did and didn't say. It expressed concern for my mental health. It suggested I might be confused about the family's financial situation. It mentioned very gently that they had come to rely on my support, and it was disorienting to have it change. It did not at any point express gratitude. It did not at any point say my name. I saved the voicemail. I still have it. The weeks that followed were strange, quiet in a way I had not experienced in years. My phone stopped buzzing with transfer requests. I started sleeping better. I went back to something I had given up without realizing, which was spending Saturday mornings the way I wanted to spend them. I took a watercolor class at the community center. I had lunch with my friend Deborah twice in 1 month, which had not happened in longer than I could account for. I booked a long weekend in Prince Edward County, a place I had been meaning to go for 7 years, and I went, and I walked along the water, and I bought local wine, and I read an entire novel in 2 days, and I did not think about a single spreadsheet. I thought about Marcus, of course. I thought about him constantly. That is the thing people don't tell you about this kind of decision. It's not relief, not entirely. There's grief in it. There's the version of your child you carry inside you, the 7-year-old who needed the solar system model, the 14-year-old who cried after his first real heartbreak and let you sit on the edge of the bed. You don't stop loving that person when you stop accepting being treated poorly by the person he became. You just learn to hold both things at once. Owen came down from Kingston on a Sunday in November. We made soup, the big pot, the one I've had since both of them were children. His older kid, who is 8 and currently obsessed with rocks, brought me a piece of rose quartz he had found at a conservation area. I put it next to the card on the refrigerator. After the kids were in bed in the spare room, Owen and I sat at the kitchen table with the last of the wine. "Have you heard from him?" he asked. "Not since October," I said. He nodded. He didn't say anything for a moment, which is one of the things I have always loved about him. He knows when words are not the right tool. "He'll come around," he said finally. "I think he has to figure out what it cost him first, what it actually cost him." I thought about that for a long time after he went to sleep. What it had cost, not money, something harder to recover. The letter I had kept in the drawer, I rewrote it 3 times over the course of those months. Not as an accusation, not as an invoice, though I want to be honest with you and tell you that the thought crossed my mind. I wrote it as the thing it actually was, a record. I told him what I had given, not the amounts, but the intention behind each one. I told him I had understood that life is hard and things come up, and people need each other. I told him I had wanted to be the kind of mother who showed up when it mattered. I told him that showing up had started to mean something different than I had intended, and that I had let it go on too long because I was afraid of what stopping would mean. I told him I was not angry. I was tired, and I was sad, and I missed him. Not the calls about money, but the other ones. The ones that used to happen before that became the whole of our relationship. I sealed it. I didn't send it. Not yet. In February, 8 months after the butter tarts, Marcus called on a Sunday evening. I almost didn't answer. He sounded different. I noticed it in the first 10 seconds, in the way he said my name, in the slight roughness in it that told me he had been thinking about making this call for a while. He told me that they had separated, that she had moved out in January, that the house was going on the market because they couldn't carry it on one income. He said this last part very carefully, as if he expected me to say something, as if he was still not sure what version of me he was going to get. I said, "I'm sorry, Marcus. That is a hard thing. Not I told you so." Not a single word about the spreadsheet. Not one. He cried a little. We talked for a long time. Longer than we had talked in years, about nothing related to money. He told me he had been doing a lot of thinking. He told me he was embarrassed. He used that word specifically, embarrassed. He said that when the transfer requests stopped coming through, when the money wasn't there anymore, he had been so angry, and then the anger had started to turn into something else, something that sat heavier, that made him look at the bank statements differently than he used to. Made him do his own accounting. "Mum," he said at some point near the end of the call, "I don't know how you didn't hate me." "I don't hate you," I said. "I was hurt. That's different. He is in a 1-bedroom apartment in Hamilton now. He is paying his own bills, all of them, and I know this because he told me so and because I no longer have a reason not to believe him. He came for Easter. He brought a bottle of Ontario Red and helped me clear the eaves, because they actually did need doing, and I stood at the bottom of the ladder and handed things up, and we talked about nothing important, sports scores and the neighbor's new dog, and whether PEI was worth the drive. And it felt something like ordinary, like the ordinary I had been missing for years without letting myself name it. I sent the letter 2 weeks after that visit. I mailed it. I wanted him to hold it, the actual paper, the way you hold something you're meant to keep. He called me when he received it. He didn't say much. He said he had read it twice and he was going to read it again, and he said thank you, which is a small word, but the right one. There is something I want to say to anyone listening to this who recognizes any part of what I've described. Not the dramatic parts, the numbers, the spreadsheet, the quiet part. The part where you keep saying yes because stopping feels like abandonment, because you were raised to believe that love means being available, because you have spent your whole life being the person who shows up and you don't know how to be anything else. You can love someone completely and still refuse to fund a life they are capable of building themselves. You can be a devoted parent and still say, I need to look after myself now. These two things are not in conflict. I had to learn that at 63, which is later than I would have liked, but here I am. The spreadsheet is still on my laptop. I don't open it anymore. But I haven't deleted it either. I think of it the way I think of those old marking rubrics I kept from my teaching years. Not something I look at daily, but a record that something happened, that it was real, that I was there. Owen's youngest mailed me another rock last week. A piece of green calcite this time, wrapped in tissue paper, with a note in very large 8-year-old printing that said, "For grandma because it is the color of your door. My door is sage green. I painted it myself last spring, the first home project I had done in years. Just for me, for no particular reason, because I liked the color. I put the calcite beside the rose quartz on the windowsill, where the morning light comes in. I thought about my 63 years, about the house I helped buy, the door I painted myself, the butter tarts I made that Saturday morning, about what it costs to be generous without boundaries and what it feels like finally to know the difference. And I thought about Owen, who never asked me for a single thing he didn't need, who drives 4 hours on a Sunday to make soup, who raised a child who mails rocks to his grandmother. I love you, Owen. I love you too, Marcus. Come for dinner soon. I have been thinking, since all of this settled, about what it actually takes for a person to change course. Not the dramatic moment, the spreadsheet, the voicemail, the call where I finally said enough. Those were just the visible parts. What actually took courage was the quieter thing that happened long before any of that, which was admitting to myself that I had been participating in something I knew was wrong. I had known for a long time. Not consciously, not in the way I could have put into words over dinner, but somewhere underneath all the yes and, of course, and I'll transfer it this afternoon, I knew. I kept the spreadsheet after all. You don't keep records of things you're completely at peace with. I kept it because some part of me understood that what was happening needed to be documented, that one day I would need to look at it clearly. I just wasn't ready. And so I kept saying yes, and the spreadsheet kept growing, and I kept not looking at the total at the bottom of the column. What I understand now is that generosity without honesty is not generosity at all. It's avoidance dressed up as kindness. I was afraid of what Marcus would feel if I said no. Afraid of the distance, the silence, the possibility that I would lose him. And so I bought my way into a version of closeness that wasn't real, that couldn't be, because it was built entirely on what I was willing to transfer and nothing else. When I finally stopped, I found out exactly what had been holding that relationship together. It was a hard thing to learn. It was the right thing to learn. Marcus is doing better now, not because life got easier for him. It got harder, at least at first. The house is sold. He is in a small apartment, paying his own insurance, making his own decisions about where the money goes. That difficulty, I think, is what he needed. Not punishment, just reality. The reality I had been quietly absorbing on his behalf for 2.5 years. There is a version of love that protects people from consequences, and it feels like devotion while you're doing it, but what it actually does is keep them from growing. I had to stop loving Marcus that way in order to love him better. Owen never needed me to do any of it. He asked for things when he genuinely needed them, said thank you, and handled the rest himself. He drives 4 hours to make soup. His kid mails me rocks. That did not happen by accident. It happened because Owen learned somewhere along the way that love is something you show up for, not something you invoice. I think about Maureen from 2 years ago sometimes, standing at that kitchen table, staring at $95,000 in a spreadsheet, the tea going cold. I want to tell her, you already know what you need to do. You have known for a while. It is going to hurt, and then it is going to be quiet, and then the quiet is going to feel like something you forgot you were allowed to have. I painted my front door sage green last spring, just because I liked the color. That is not a small thing. That is what it looks like when you start taking up the space that was always yours.